Hey YouTubers, just got a well, kind of a rant video, kind of a how-to video. I've been last couple of days. Charlie, do you want to be on camera too? Last couple of days I was looking at YouTube videos of other people survival stuff, just getting ideas for what I could improve on. Charlie, go lay down. This dog. Anyway, got videos, was watching videos, and great stuff, but I kept seeing the same thing over and over again. I mean, it wasn't none of the major players, I guess you would say. It was mostly the people that are independent, kind of like me. They'd go to make like a fire stick or something, and you'd see them, and what they do, wrong way. What they do is you'd see them, they'd start to shave, and it would either skip along and just cut little chunks off, or it would not even dig in, and you'd see them like have to put their thumb on it and force it to go. And certain woods are harder than other woods, but a sharp blade should be able to cut no matter what. A lot of the stuff I was seeing was preventable, and that's basically what today's video is about, is how to keep your tools sharp. This isn't how to 100% regrind and resharpen an edge. However, with enough time and effort, you could do that this way. I'm going to reposition the camera and figure out something to do with my dog, because he apparently wants to be on camera too. So alrighty, so the stuff you're going to need for this project, first and foremost, you are going to need a dull knife, or a knife that, this method will work for polishing knives of varying styles. This is my Condor bush lore. It's got a Scandi grind, which you can see there, which, if you really look at it, is not all that shiny. It's been a minute since I've sharpened it, but it holds an edge fairly well, but that's besides the point. Basically, this method is for pretty much any knife. Just, you can use it to, I don't want to say resharpen, because that's improper term. More like re-hone. It's somewhere between resharpening and honing. It's not exactly, it's not quite the level of resharpening where your blade is completely dull. Again, but it's also not, striking it on a steel or stropping it. It's when it gets close to being dull. Or just, touching it up or polishing the flats on it, which I sometimes like to do. Basically, what you'll need is a flat surface. This is actually a piece of glass. It's a tempered pane of glass that's roughly, I'm going to say, 7 inches, 8 inches wide by 1.5 feet long. It's just a rough estimate. You're going to need it on a prop, which I have a couple of kitty litter buckets that are very well weighted with my pet food. You'll need some way to secure it. Down here is a strip of Gorilla Tape that goes down and around, and it secures the toe of it. Up on this end is a piece of Gorilla Tape that secures it all the way down under here, and then underneath here is just, you'll need some way to prop it up, because as you can see, it's at a slight angle. Basically, just some way to prop it up. I'm using a couple of old sharpening stones that I can still technically use to resharpen an edge, but for that I have a different rig. That's this thing here, which just holds the stone, and it's got rubber feet, and I take it out and drop it on a piece of wood and drive the nails through, and it holds it in place. But that's completely different. That's before this step. But anyway, a couple of stones or something to prop it up, roughly 15 degrees or 15 to 25 degrees, somewhere in there, just to get it. Because I feel if you're working flat, you're leaning over it too much, and it doesn't give you the ability to keep the angle proper. So you got the glass, you got the prop. I've got a couple of pieces of Gorilla Tape underneath there just to keep it from grinding on the glass too much. You got the way to secure it. You got the bench to work on. Of course, you could throw this in a vise. Rig up something to throw in a vise, nail down this, whatever. Anyway, you also need some spray adhesive. Basically, this is how you're going to secure your abrasive surface to this. This will be your abrasive surface, and I'll show you that in just a sec. I got the middleweight bonding because it's what the store had at the time. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter the heavier weight it is. I mean, of course, the better it's going to stick, but it's also going to be harder to take off, which, I mean, if you use steaming hot water, you just run it under hot water in a tap, it clears it off pretty good. You just peel it right off. And then you'll need some wet or dry sandpaper of varying grits. I have 320 and 400. This usually comes with 220, but I seem to have misplaced my 220 grit, but I don't need that right now because my knife is already fairly sharp. This is just going to bring it up to shaving sharpness. You'll need some way to cut said sandpaper, which I've just got an old pair of crappy shears, scissors. I use them as utility shears. And like I said before, you'll need a knife in need of sharpening, or one that you have run on your stones and you don't have a fine enough stone. If you got a coarse stone, this is a good alternative. Very cheap, a lot cheaper than the stone, and infinitely reusable. Unless of course you break the glass, which this is tempered glass, so I'm not really going to break it by pushing on it too hard. If I hit it on the edge, yeah, there's that, but hey, that just comes with the territory. So, first things first, you want to get, in this case, I'm using 320. You could start with, I believe they come like 180, 150. If you can find it, like the coarsest you can find. Basically, what you want to do is line this up with the edge of the glass, and then just give it just barely like a 16th to a 32nd, or a 32nd to a 16th of an inch right along the edge, just so you're not right up to the edge with it, because that can cause some problems. It'll give you some leeway. And then you want your knife that you're going to be sharpening, and you want to basically just figure on using a little bit before the tip. In this case, that's a debris line. There's dust on the sandpaper. Basically, you just want to cut it straight to that using any means that you have. In this case, I'm going to fold it to get a square edge. And then I'm going to cut along that with my scissors. And of course, you don't want to put the cut edge toward the edge that you're going to be working with of the glass. So this is my cut edge. I'm going to flip it to where this is now, the factory edge is right here. And then what you want to do is, if you've never used spray adhesive before, quick word, highly flammable, extremely flammable, but the best way to get this to stick is just one spray there, and while that's getting tacky, you just spray the back here, sandpaper. And you just want to make sure you get the edges really well, because it will come up on you if you don't. And then you get your factory edge, which is this way. And then the easiest way I found to do it is you turn it on edge, you line up your edges just a little bit, and then just walk down the thing and let this edge stay up. Just back and forth, just tap it down. And then once you get it all over, it just keeps bubbles from getting out of there. And then you want to press it on there really well. If you have some sort of dowel rod, which I happen to have one handy right here. You just get some sort of dowel rod and you roll that across it just like a rolling pin. You're making sure you get all the gaps out of it. And then you want to let this set up for a few minutes. Use this as your gauge down here with the overspray. Use that as your gauge. Once that's completely dry, then you can begin the sharpening process. One thing I forgot to mention, you will need a spray bottle of water capable of an actual spray instead of a jet. It disperses the water much finer, much more evenly across the surface. Another way to do it, you can just have like a can or a bucket of water, just dip your hand in it and rub it up and down on the sandpaper. That's just one way to do that. I'm going to let this set up and then we'll be right back. Alrighty, we are set up and ready to go. So as with all knife sharpening, you want to make sure to maintain the bevel. On knives that are ground like this, or like the full flat grind, those are fairly easy because the bevel is so wide. The easiest way to do it, you put the spine first, you lay down, and then you push down on the bevel, and then you just hold that angle right there. This right here, easy to do. You know, you just scrape back and forth just like that. That's if your blade is completely dull. The way I'm going to do it is just like using a stone. You just run it this way. I start with 10, do 10 times this way, and then I do 10 this way, then 9, 8, 8, and so forth until I get to 1. And then when I get to 1, I repeat 1. So 1, 1, 1, 1. I do that 3 or 4 times. And that usually is enough to get my edge sharp. After that, it's all about polishing, which a polished edge, I don't necessarily know if it'll stay sharper longer, but it'll definitely make little slices easier because there's less friction. And again, it depends on the angle of the grind, how thick your blade is, because a thick blade, just based on physics, will not slice as thin as this blade can. Then again, thick blades do have their place in bushcraft, i.e. batoning for splitting logs. You can use them as a makeshift hand axe or machete or something along those lines. But anyway, enough dilly-dallying. We're gonna get to sharpening on this knife. And for this knife, it's not really sharpening, it's more polishing. But just take your spray bottle, a few mists there, and then you just want to get it worked in a little bit. And if you work too much like this with your hands, it'll polish off your fingerprints. But anyway, I'll start. What I'm going to do is I'll start. I'll do a few, and then I'll cut, and then I'll show you what it looks like after I've done the first pass of 10, 10, 9, 9, all the way down to 1. We'll see what it looks like after that. So. And I'm not putting very much pressure on this, but you can see that it's already making a difference. See if I can get that in film. you can see that a lot of the lines are actually coming back to one direction there. Get that wiped off. They're all starting to go the same direction, and you want that. And with this blade it's a little difficult to do because the blade, it's the same level up until about here, and then it points, like it tapers this way. It gets thinner as it goes down this way. The bevel does. So what I'm having to do is I'm going to have to bring it like this and then pushing this edge down a little bit more in order to get that to go, but it's actually once you get that burr worked up and you work it down, I'll show you a way to polish it off of there without having to strop it on a belt, which is one way to do it. But I'm going to go ahead and cut here, and then we'll pick it back up after I've done all the passes. Alright, I'm just now on the final stroke, the ones, and I've got just the tiniest little burr right up here. I can feel it as I run my finger across the blade. Just a slight little burr. But I'm going to show you how to work that down. You want to start right there. I usually start my blade just like this, at a slight angle, about like that actually. Slight angle. And what I do is I bring it up like this and I sweep forward, just like that. I'm basically, let's see if I can, there we go. I'm starting down here at the beginning where just the point, is just at the edge of it. I start like this and then sweep it. So that sharpens back here as well as at the tip, which the tip is usually the dullest point in my experience from people's knives that I've sharpened. The tip is usually the dullest point. The sharpest point is usually back here because that's where most people, they grab it and they just sweep like this. They either get the tip to where it comes up like this and it rounds it over this way with the spine of the blade. It completely blunts that tip, so it's, instead of being a point, sorry, I'm trying to do this backwards. Instead of being a point right there, it's rounded. Or they do the same kind of thing and they round over the actual edge itself, which, I mean, that's a big pet peeve of mine. But anyway, what you're going to do is you're going to take it, you're going to lay it flat, bring it up, and just very, very little pressure. Just focus on the technique. You don't need much pressure. And that took away that burr. Then you start down at this end. Same thing. Just very, very little pressure. And at this point, your sandpaper that was whatever grit it was is going to be about 2 levels finer. So this was 320, so it's going to be probably pretty close to 600 grit at this point. You can barely feel anything on it except at the edges. That's exactly what you want, because as this wears down, the finish on it will be finer, on the knife will be finer. So we're just going to go very, very lightly, because the harder you press, the bigger that burr is going to get. And you want to focus on that tip there too. So what I see a lot of times is that tip gets rounded out, and then you have no way of fine point carving, which I think is a really big thing, because, I mean, yes, you can push your way through, like an awl if you're trying to do like a bow drill or something like that, or like a needle or a net needle, something like that. But if your point is fine, there's going to be a lot less work. If your knife is sharp, there's going to be a lot less work involved. It's going to be a lot less dangerous. A sharp cutting tool is a safe cutting tool. A safe cutting tool makes a happy camper. Happy campers don't get cut, usually. So now that that is to what I believe. Yeah, that's nice and even now. Get this wiped off. And inevitably, unless you just anally decide you want to polish that up right there, it's going to be less polished than the rest of it. Let me see if I can turn on the micro on this. Well, I'm not going to be able to, but what I can do is I can zoom in really close. There we go. You see pretty much the lines are going to be going the same direction. Same with this side. They're all pretty much sweeping up the same way, except right back here at the heel. But if you pay attention, that back there is super sharp. It's just as sharp as the rest of it. Which, I mean, it's not super sharp at this point, but it will be. Basically what you want to do is repeat this process with a finer grit, or you can repeat this process, and what you can do is you can double up, do 10, 10, 10, 10, and then 9, 9, 9, 9, and then keep going just like that until you get down to the end. And then when you get to the end, just lighten up as you go, just super light, you know, one pass very light, one pass just as light, and then that will get you a shaving sharp knife. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my little trick to getting rid of that burr, or what I can do is actually tell you what it is. The burr that inevitably comes up on the edge. The easiest way and the quickest way to get rid of it, and major companies do it, they have a buffing wheel. It's a slightly firm buffing wheel, either on a bench, like a benchtop buffer, or, you know, a handheld buffer is what I use. It's a little disc about that big, about 3.5 inches. You just get your drill up in the vise, and if it's got one of those lock buttons on the side, you turn it on, hit the lock, or throw it in your drill press or your lathe or anything you've got that's sturdy and can keep revolutions up really high. What you do is you just run it to where, let's see if I can find something to substitute for it. Basically, think of this as, I know there's a screw in the way, but think of this as your buffing wheel. Let's see if I can get this the way I want it. Okay, instead of coming right at it like you would, instead of coming like this to match the bevel, you want to come just slightly past it. And I'm not going to touch this while it's, you know, because this is metal and this is metal, and I don't want that. I just sharpened my knife. So you want to go from just right there to just slightly past it by like 5 to 10 degrees. And what it'll do is, basically when you're running it back and forth, you run it like this, you know, real nice and slow, run it like this. First of all, it'll polish up this flat right here, the bevel. It'll polish that up and get it nice and sharp, nice and shiny. And then, you know, I do 5 passes this way, and then I'll flip it 5 passes this way, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. And then on the last one, I'll do a very, just barely kissing the edge there. Just barely touch it. And then flip it and barely touch it. And then that should give you the edge you're looking for. Basically, once you get done with the buffing wheel, you're left with a super polished edge. If you use just the buffing wheel, it'll polish it a little bit. But if you actually get some rubbing compound or some buffing compound, what it'll do is it will not only polish this bevel here and sharpen the edge, it'll sharpen the edge as well. It'll get rid of that burr, and then you'll have nothing but a super sharp edge. And this one already, I mean, I've just got some paper here. You just, oh, damn it. See, I'm trying to look through the camera at the same time, and it's not really working out so well. Alright. I can probably make feather sticks on this piece of paper. And I'll show you that tip that's really sharp too. That's how sharp you need your knife. Theoretically, you could shave with this, but I mean, I wouldn't recommend it until you absolutely polish that edge, because there's going to be so much micro friction. The hairs are so fine that there's going to be so much friction just based on that edge right there. You can see all those little lines. Those will cause friction. Those will snag any loose hair, any fine hair, any coarse hair. It's different when you're cutting a piece of wood, like I'll show you. Let's see. Right here, I got a piece of wood. See, you can shave little fine curls off with this thing. And this is a piece of oak. I'm afraid of hitting my camera. Let me see if I can get this down a little further. Yeah. And you just get fine little curls off of there. And that's before polishing. I mean, that's pulling off really, really fine curls there. I mean, these few here, that's a super fine curl. And if you wanted to, you could just sit there and just pull off little curls like that all day long. And this is a super dry piece of wood. This is a dowel rod. But you can see I've got the makings of a fire stick right there, a feather stick right there. Super, super fine curls compared to how big that blade is. This is a very, very nice knife. It will sharpen up wonderfully. It will hold an edge wonderfully, and I tell you, it's got a nice weight. Very nice edge on the back for you know, throwing sparks if you really needed to. You've got about 4.5 inches of edge to use, you know, unless you don't want to use the very tip here, but they polish that pretty well. I'm not going to go into a full-blown knife review on this, but I'm going to say that for under 50 bucks, you can't really beat this knife for a mid-size, heavy-duty knife. But anyway, this video is basically part of my my knife stuff. I guess you can call it a rant, because I got fed up with it, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do a quick video on how I sharpen knives so I don't have to spend 30-40 bucks for a Japanese waterstone. This is a very quick, very easy method. I mean, the most expensive part's probably either going to be the pane of glass or the spray adhesive. Sandpaper cost me like less than $5, and you get, that was probably a third of a sheet, so you've got 3 more right here if you really wanted to get into it. I mean, this is still viable for after you do the next grit up. You could still use this for your other knives. And of course, a pane of glass has got 2 sides, so you can spray one side and put something on it, and you can spray the other side and, you know, put a coarser grit on it. And you don't have to be afraid of breaking it, because if you break it, I mean, a pane of glass like this is probably like, what, somewhere between $5 and $10. It's not that expensive. It's very reasonable. There's also go to a quarry of some sort, or a countertop manufacturer. They'll usually have scraps of granite, and all you really need is a scrap of granite about, you know, as wide as your hand, maybe a little wider, 5 inches, 6 inches, about a foot long. That's all you need. And it doesn't really matter what thickness. The heavier it is, of course, it's going to be better. And then you could throw it on your countertop and put some of that stuff they put in cabinets, at the bottom of the cabinets for tread. Just set that on top of there, and then spray your spray foam or spray adhesive, and, you know, put your sandpaper down on it. And then if you want to, you can flip it over and cut the edge to where it matches right up with the edge, and you can get in there. And that's one way you can polish this. The back part back here. Just take that and just run it back and forth real lightly on it. But honestly, that part, this little corner right here, is the part that does not ever get used by anyone. That's why, I mean, I wish this thing had a choil right in here so I could get all the way back here, but I mean, for what it is, it's a really nice knife. But anyway, I think that wraps up this video. If you have any, you know, comments, questions, or any, you know, general critiques or anything like that, you know, how I could make the video better, or how I could improve this, or something that, you know, works for you, by all means, post a response, post a reply, comment on it, like it, subscribe if you really like the video, check out my other videos. There's going to be plenty more to come. I've got some days off, and the weather's going to be, hopefully, getting better. It's been pretty crappy lately, so I'll do what I can, given, you know, my time frame. But that's it for today, and I'm signing off, YouTube. Take it easy.